I'm Rob Whitlock. I'm an architect. I'm a design partner at KPF. I started working here in 1987 after having graduated from Columbia University in 1985. I moved to New York to go to Columbia from central New Jersey, and I felt like I was entering an entirely different world. My father was a woodshop teacher, so I was building things from the time I was 4 years old. And I grew up in a place that there weren't a lot of architects around that were role models, but I found, I interned with an architect at one point when I was a senior in high school. And that was just like, it was like walking into a dream. And just the interaction with the other people and the focus of the work and I just loved every aspect of it. KPF was founded on the 4th of July in 1976 when the country was in an economic downturn. I think 60% of architects were unemployed at the time. And Gene Cohn and Bill Pedersen and Shelley Fox started an office in the kitchen of one of them. They decided they were going to do this. One was responsible for marketing, one was responsible for managing and delivering the projects, and the other was responsible for design. They were all established architects. They didn't just graduate from school. They knew about all of those other aspects of the profession. And they knew, had close relationships to their partners. And so they were able to sort of act as a single organism, but with these focuses. And the very first project was renovating an old armory on West 67th Street for ABC TV. KPF started working abroad in 1989. We had a project in Japan, and shortly thereafter one in Jakarta in Indonesia. And I started working in Singapore in 1990 and mainland China in roughly 2000. And I have a fondness for Singapore, maybe because it was really my first international destination, that and Hong Kong together. And that city is fascinating to me because they don't have their own water. They get their water by pipeline from Malaysia. The progress that they've made in the last 30 years, I think, is remarkable. The population has doubled. Urban planning is sort of paramount in their thinking, and both providing a better life for all Singaporean residents, but allowing development to occur in a way that's consistent with who they think they are. So the motto of the Urban Redevelopment Authority is towards a tropical city of excellence. So while their downtown has been densified in their high-rise buildings, there's been an effort to make sure that the city remains green and publicly accessible, probably to a greater degree than it did previously. I think the building in Singapore that's got the gardens spread throughout it is a favorite of mine. I designed a building in Hong Kong in Causeway Bay called Hennessy Center that's office on top of retail that has public space and a sky garden on the 8th floor. And it was allowed because of the change in the way the zoning worked in New York, but it's a building that's much more engaged with the varying scales of the buildings that surround it. When I started working, we made models from clay. We work in a comparative process, so we generate multiple schemes to understand how the building relates with its context or how it satisfies the specifics of the internal program. So the models that you see behind me are some of the outgrowths of that exercise. So it's much given that a lot of design exploration is digital. Most of the models behind me are produced from 3D printers, so it's a much quicker process than it used to be, but there was something really wonderful about starting with a block of clay and working subtractively to make something. When I first moved to New York, I was, I think, maybe more influenced I am at the moment by cultural institutions, performances, museums. And our office was on 57th Street, and I would spend every lunch hour at MoMA just, familiarizing myself with the collection. And I think exposure to the arts is still important to me. But I It's primarily the human interaction, and then just seeing the city evolve. I mean, it is a big laboratory for, social interaction. It's like this office works because it's in New York, and the people that we are able to attract and bring into this sort of remarkable process is due entirely to that, to the armature of the city and its environment. New York during the pandemic had two fundamentally different personas. I think residential neighborhoods really hadn't changed. My neighborhood, which is just 20-minute walk east of here, the restaurants were all open with tables on the street. Small shops just had lines of people outside. They were functioning pretty much as they had, though maybe with, lesser populations than they had. People who could move out, many people who could move out of the city did. But this area was desolate. I mean, I would walk to the office, there'd be nobody on Fifth Avenue. It was just really scary. The focus on sustainability has manifested itself in different ways, partly as the larger collective discussion about how one meets the challenge unfolds. So here in New York, as you may or may not be aware, the city or the state of New York has decided that by 2030, the goal is that all electricity will come from non-carbon sources. So water, wind, solar, whatever it is. And so that the cleanest delivery of energy is through electricity. Now, this is inconsistent with the way anyone thought about energy 30 years ago. So the city of New York is updating its building codes, and they've decided that, and I'm not sure of the date, but that new buildings will no longer be able to use natural gas to fire generators or boilers. Everything has got to be electric or electric ready. So we have several projects in the city. I'm working on the building that's taking the place of 5 World Trade Center, a residential tower, 1,200 units, a big affordable housing component, some office at the base. And that's being designed to meet the new energy goals of the city. Our London office is doing remarkable work, I think, because in England, the discussion is not just about energy use, but about the entire carbon environment. How much carbon is used in making the building, in building the building, in operating the building. And so internally, we're developing amazing tools to be able to understand all of those metrics and to create, office buildings that have more natural ventilation or give you more personal control of your environment or are not designed like warehouses of people. I think that architecture has the ability to improve quality of life at so many different levels, not just how one responds environmentally, but again, the whole premise of sustainability is not just energy usage, but creating a healthier environment for everyone who occupies those buildings. Most cities appropriately are looking upon their historic building stock as something to take pride in and preserve. It's not terribly sustainable to constantly be tearing down perfectly good buildings and putting new ones in their place. But a lot of the existing stock is not suited for some of the uses that might go into them. Some of the most sustainable buildings in New York City are the lofts down in Soho. They started as manufacturing, they become residences, they become all sorts of things, they become office space, and they're designed in a way that there's flexibility of use. So that is also a sort of big goal in the work that we're doing. I may respond to that by talking about a building that we completed recently near Hudson Yards. It was a conversion of an older low-rise building, may have been a warehouse building, big, robust structure. The core was removed, lightweight structure was built on top. All the ideas that have been developing about what a workspace of the future should be, how anyone in that office space should be able to do their work, interact with others. And it recently sold for some enormous amount of money to a secondary investor. And so it's a renovated building that is in some ways more desirable than some of the buildings that have recently been built. The world has really moved on quite significantly in the way that, expectations about what buildings should do. There's an expectation amongst people who are coming into their working lives of what that life should look like. It doesn't look like what their father's life looked like. It looks like what they imagine a young person out of college should be doing. And a lot of that is enforced by, social media. I think in moving into the future, we'll be less densely. We're reimagining the way the office space is utilized. There will be more spaces for, more spaces like this where teams can get together and interact, or people across teams. So more social spaces for social interaction. The way the office works and the way the space is utilized will be different, but I think the essential DNA of the operation will still be there. There's a big debate about how to build intelligently in New York, and it's the right discussion to be having. We've recently completed, my partner Jamie designed the one Vanderbilt adjacent to Grand Central, which is at twice the density of the buildings that it replaced. And we actually worked with city planning to build 3D models and test them in the environment to make sure that the building that went there did not negatively influence the local environment. So we did shadow studies, and the building is sort of conically shaped, so it doesn't provide greater shadows to the adjacent street than the buildings that were there previously, which were filled out the floor, the full site area. The building also provides below-grade connection to Grand Central and to the rail lines coming from Penn Station that go out to Long Island, so it's helping ease congestion in Midtown. So it's, I think there's a much more prolonged and inclusive debate about what a new building in the city looks like than maybe the way buildings were generated 20 years ago. It's a really powerful tool to envision what an ideal city looks like. And we did some studies for Sidewalk Labs for a site in Toronto. And we have developed a lot of programs in-house, sort of urban design tools that test building orientations relative to sustainability or views or space utilization, or, so this idea that you could sort of write a script and come up with the perfect city. And I think there's a role to be played by that. But most cities we're working in have a lot of history that we've got to deal with. And ideally, those exercises provide a means of understanding about how to deal with the exigencies of our current circumstances.